Hey everyone, this is Matt here on the Vinyl Head UK channel. It's that time of week already. It's time to look at some more memories from the Download Festival, and this time we are looking at 2007. So this was my fourth download, the fifth Download Festival altogether. We take in 2003. So I've done 04, 05 and 06, and here we are at 2007. Now, this was the last download to feature on the iconic sort of Monsters of Rock Donington location of being in the middle of the racetrack. I always refer to it, but the Paradise City video by Guns N' Roses. That is that iconic backdrop of a Dunlop tyre, the big bank down the side. And this was the last download to be in that area. The reason, from what I believe, was obviously it's a racetrack. We all know it's a racetrack. Donington is a racetrack. And there had been complaints from some of the motorbike guys who were at an event after download, and I think they said that the track was slippy from beer and general rock and rollness on the track, and they decided to move it. So we'll come on to a bit more about it on the next one, on 2008 episode. But we're going to look at 2007. So as per normal, I haven't really tried to do much research. I'm picking it out of here, out of my memory. I have got my list of bands next to me, just so I can remember, as per normal. But the weather was lovely. We had another warm, hot weekend. Can you believe it? That's 4 downloads on the trot for me, where the sun was out, there was no rain, there was no mud. We went through all of that in later years, but we were doing all right weather-wise. So 2007, who did we have? So our main stage headliners. Friday night, My Chemical Romance. An interesting booking. I remember it being announced and it came with very mixed emotion. Some people very happy, some people not very happy. A band stepping up into that headline slot, but a very Marmite type band. As I say, a lot of people not so sure about them. Saturday, returning to headline. 2004, they were there headlining. Back to headline again, we had Linkin Park on the Saturday. And then again, another returning headliner. This time on the Sunday, back from 2003, when they headlined the festival, the very first edition of Download. We have Iron Maiden. So My Chemical Romance, Linkin Park and Iron Maiden were headlining Download 2007. If we look at our headliners across the board on the other stages, so, as I say, My Chemical Romance Friday. The second stage, which this year was named the Dimebag Darrell stage. Obviously, we know Dimebag, Pantera guitarist, tragically murdered whilst playing a set. So we had the Dimebag Darrell stage, and headlined on Friday were Korn. And then we had the Tuborg stage, and on the Friday was Suicidal Tendencies. We didn't have a fourth stage that year. We didn't have the Snickers Bowl. It didn't make a return, so we just had the first, second and third stages. Saturday, as I say, was Linkin Park. Second stage, the Dimebag Darrell stage, headliners were Motley Crew. And then the Tuborg, the third stage, was Head Automatica. Obviously Sunday we had Iron Maiden. And then second stage, we had Billy Talent headlining. And then on the third stage, we had Real Big Fish. So they were our headliners across the board, across all three stages, across the 3 days. As per normal, I'm going to roll through the bands I saw, try and extract some memories for you guys. Remember, join in the conversation, drop some comments, let me know what you remember, what was good, what was bad. I can only remember so much. If you saw some bands that I didn't, let me know what you remember, what you thought. Was it good? Were they awful? Who knows? Let me know, okay? So I will try and remember as much as I possibly can. And then we'll look a little bit about other bands that played, maybe who I would have liked to have seen, who I didn't get a chance to see, looking at bands' progression through the lineup. So, should we get started? As I say, it was a gorgeous weekend. Let's kick it off on Friday. Our first band on were a British rock band who I quite liked back in the day. And do you know what? I still listen to them a little bit now. They did some great tracks, and that was the Zico Chain. As I say, British band. I believe they are still going. I'd have to go and check that out. But they were good. A good band to kick off. They had a fairly big crowd. Crowds I'm going to talk about a little bit as this goes on. There's going to be a theme. I think there was a theme throughout the downloads on that original famous Monster of the Rock location in the middle of a racetrack. But good crowd. They open with Rehypnol, which is a track I really liked. Pretty Pictures they played, which again, track I really like. His voice had a bit of a Kurt Cobain-esque sound to it. Not a direct copycat, but I remember watching, and definitely on a couple of tracks they played, he did seem to channel a bit of Kurt Cobain coming out, which is not a bad thing, you know. It wasn't the case of, if you saw my last video for 2006 where I spoke about Matt Heafy from Trivium channeling his inner James Hetfield during their set. It wasn't like that. But you can tell there was some inspiration from Kurt Cobain, definitely. We go from a British rock band onto a couple of American rock bands following this. And we go on to Buckcherry, who I know are definitely still going. I've seen in the last few days a lot of press. I think they're dropping a new album, some tracks coming up on YouTube. But this was, so would have been, I think 15 was the album that they were touring at that point. So it was quite a 15 heavy set list. Crazy Bitch, the one that everybody knows, everybody sung along with. Again, good sized crowd. Can't tell you much more about that. I know it was a 15 heavy set, but I definitely remember Crazy Bitch being played. Everyone just sing along with that one. Another band kind of in the similar ilk followed those, and that was Hinder. They were out, their debut album had been out, so I think the set was obviously everything from the debut album. Get Stoned, Lips of an Angel, those tracks were played. It's all quite fuzzy, some of these sets. I can just remember certain tracks, mainly because they were the popular tracks at the time, the ones that everyone knew. The tracks that you go to a festival and you want to sing, you know. These aren't individual band shows. These aren't tours, so you go and you're going to hear a lot of the deep cuts. These are festival sets, and, you know, when you're at a festival, you may be watching a band that you're not a massive fan of, but you know a few tracks. You know, this is the case with me and Buckcherry and Hinder. I knew a few tracks. Those are the ones you want to sing along, you know. That's what festivals are about sometimes. Following that, we had, for me, I would say, I was going to say band of a day, but I think looking at who played. There's a band that pipped them very slightly, but it's close. And coming back for that sort of mid-afternoon Friday slot that they did in 2005 was the very welcome return of Megadeth with Dave Mustaine. This was on the United Abominations tour. We had the Drovers, Glenn and Sean. We had James Lomenzo on bass. And I tell you what, they didn't mess around that day. They came with a point to prove. Dave Mustaine seemed like that old, angry at the world Dave Mustaine. And they played probably the best Megadeth set I have been lucky enough to see. I've seen Megadeth a few times. I love my thrash metal. It's my favourite subgenre. I'm a big thrash metal fan. I've countless times mentioned Metallica are my favourite band. Okay, you might argue they're not quite the thrash band they maybe once were. But Megadeth, I'm always going to try and catch Megadeth. They're playing next year at Download. So 2022, if you're watching this in the future. They look like they're going to be second stage headliners. That will be a show I really want to catch. But they were on fire that day. I don't know what point they were out trying to prove, but they did it. They featured tracks, I think Sleepwalker, which was the opening track, I think, off United Abominations they opened with. The latter half of the set was just a hit after hit. You know, we had Peace, Sal's Symphony, Holy Wars. Holy Wars had a little snippet of Mechanics, the Mechanics in it, which of course was what turned out to be the Four Horsemen for Metallica. It's a song that Dave wrote that he then took away to Megadeth, rewrote, or maybe took back the original lyrics and put it into what it is now. But they were seriously on fire that day. And if it wasn't for another band later on, definitely would have been the highlight of that day for me. Definitely up there on one of the better bands of a festival that year. Absolutely. Following Megadeth, we had a band that I didn't watch, and that was Dragon Force. Dragon Force have played before. I've never really been a Dragon Force fan. It's too widdly diddly for me, I'm afraid. I don't want to say that's a bad thing. It's just not my personal taste. So we went off, maybe watched them from a distance, grab some food, beer, whatever. Can't comment. Wolf Mother were on after that. I spoke earlier about festival bands or festival sets. You may not be a big fan of a certain band, but you want to hear a couple of the more known tracks. Woman and Joker and the Thief were those tracks for me. They played them. I was happy. It was a bit like Coheed and Cambria, who were the year before. I only really wanted to see Welcome Home. So we got to see Woman and Joker and the Thief. I can't comment much more than that. They were, judging by obviously their position on the lineup, pretty much at the height of their fame at that point. You know, third down from the top. Not a bad place to be. Good set list for them. Good length for set list. They kind of dipped a little bit. Not quite there at the height they were at that point. But I think Woman obviously did that for them. That was a big tune throughout that year. I think everybody knew that track. Whether you're into the rock metal world or not, it seemed to be played everywhere. So, yeah, we got to hear those. As I say, festival songs, festival set, whatever. It was cool. I think we were quite far back as well. We kind of just chilled out a little bit through Dragon Force and carried on up there for Wolf Mother. And, so this makes sense, carrying on why we were a little further back. Following Wolf Mother, in our sub-headline slot for the Friday, was Velvet Revolver. Another sub-headline set for them, following 2005 on the Ozfest day where they sub-headlined to Black Sabbath, all hail. But they were back. We did watch them a little bit further back. I'll point out, you've heard his name before. I went with my very good friend Andy. Again, met up with some people there, but Andy is who I went with. We watched a little bit further back. There was no crowd surfing during Velvet Revolver. I told a story about 05. I went crowd surfing during Velvet Revolver in 2005. Pretty unsuccessful. I got dropped on my head, but I did try and crowd surf a little bit too far back. I did crowd surf, and Andy and I both did, I forgot to mention this, during Megadeth. And I'll be happy to tell you, we had a little bit more success for crowd surfing during Megadeth. We crowd surfed a bit closer to the front. We made it down and over the barrier. We didn't get dropped on our heads, which was good. But we watched Velvet Revolver from a little bit further back. We saw them play, obviously, their own material. There were a couple of albums in, which I think they only did a couple of albums in the end. But they did Stone Temple Pilots, and they did some Guns N' Roses, of course. Scott Weiland and Slash and Duff and Matt saw them. But we stood a little bit further back, and the reason that we did, I mean, it was good. We left about, I don't know, half, maybe 3/4 of a set through, because we wanted to head over to the Dimebag Darrell stage, as it was known that year, the second stage, because we wanted to go and see the headliner of that night. Now, we got there, so back then you came out, it was a one-way, so you came out and you went round to the right, and that took you back behind the main stage, where there was a big marquee, which was our second stage. Obviously, we know now that the second stage is just a smaller version of the main stage, its current location. I actually really like the second stage, how it is now. It's on a bit of a slope, you get a great view, great sound. Yeah, I like the second stage, how it is now. But you went round, you went into that marquee, huge big marquee. When you're done, you came back out round the other way. And yeah, that was how it was back then. A bit more of a pain, I felt, going around for the second stage, back how it was. But we didn't get there very often, back when Download was where it was initially. We went and saw like Mastodon at different years, probably about it really. Looking back on the lineup, so I wish I'd gone to the second stage a bit more. We could have seen some real great sets, but we didn't. Anyway, we went to go for the second stage headline, and we caught the end of the sub-headliners, which were Enter Shikari, who had jumped up the bill from being quite a low spot to being that high up on the second stage. I think Enter Shikari nowadays are a bit more Reading-esque. I think they appeal more to the Reading crowd than they do the Download crowd. But they had quite a full tent. I think that maybe might have been down to who was headlining following them. But we caught the end of Enter Shikari. It looked pretty wild in there. We were a little bit further back, so obviously we couldn't get too far forward because everyone was in place for Enter Shikari. We saw the, is it Sorry You're Not a Winner? Might be right, I'm not really up on Enter Shikari. The one where they clap, we saw that. It was like one of the tracks I knew of theirs. That was doing a lot of rounds on the music channels. So we saw that. It was pretty wild. It's a bit of a mixture of music. Obviously, Enter Shikari, it's not rock as such. A lot of electronic elements to it as well. But, you know, there was a lot of people in there digging it. Fair dues. If you like that sort of thing, that's cool. No problem with it, just not really mine. But something that is something I really like was the headliners, which were Korn. Korn we had seen sort of the year prior, except Jonathan Davis, who was missing. He was ill, and that spawned Korn karaoke, as it was kind of dubbed. where we saw guest vocalists Corey Taylor, Des Fafara, Benji Webb, Matt Heafy come out and do some Korn tracks with the band. But they were back with Jonathan Davis this time. And also a guest drummer. And that was none other than Joey Jordison, who was, of course, with Slipknot at the time. No mask, just playing as regular Joey. And this was band of the day for me. Now, I've seen Korn a lot. They have been very much download regulars through the years. I've seen Korn numerous times in various guises and lineups and everything else. This was the best I have ever seen that band, without a shadow of a doubt. I've seen some great Korn shows, but nothing topped that headline slot on the second stage, the Dimebag Darrell stage. They were at that, I touched on it last time, they were at that kind of weird point where they had people in the band who weren't in the band wearing, well, it was a rabbit mask last time. I think they didn't have a mask, but very like face paint or something like that, I'm going to say. I might be wrong. But yeah, at that kind of weird stage with the band. But they were on fire. They opened with Here to Stay. I actually checked out a bit of their set online at Rock Am Ring the previous weekend. So you get Rock Am Ring, preceding download, weekend ahead. So if you want to kind of get a bit of a spoiler and you maybe want to see set list or just kind of the feel of a band and they're playing Rock Am Ring, it's worth just having a little look and seeing. And I kind of wanted to see, you know, what they'd be like. And I watched, they opened with Here to Stay at Rock Am Ring. It was like an extended intro with the percussion and then Joey before coming in, and it sounded great. And they did the same at Download, and it's one of my favourite Korn tracks anyway. I love that heavy riff, and it just was immense, absolutely immense. The tent was packed. Now they were up against My Chemical Romance, and then on the third stage they were up against Suicidal Tendencies. Talked about, and I will come on to My Chem, they split. Obviously the more metal crowd maybe not pull too much towards seeing My Chemical Romance, so Korn seemed to be the viable option. Obviously Suicidal, crossover band. I can't comment on what the crowd size was like, but I imagine they would have pulled a fair crowd. You know, a band who has always had a pretty strong following, is Suicidal. I'd love to see him live. I still haven't had a chance to check him out. Obviously Rob Trujillo was back with him back in the day. Digressing though. Korn had a big crowd, and I think that's partly because of My Chemical Romance, but they had a big crowd. I remember it was so hot in there from the energy and so many people in there crammed in that there was condensation dripping from the ceiling. It was that hot, so hot in there. But honestly, it was just so good. That was, I believe, coming up to, if they hadn't released it already, they were close to doing the Untitled album with that white cover. It didn't have a title, just known as Untitled. I think they did one new track off that. I might be wrong. But they did all the tracks you'd expect. They did Chutes and Ladders with a snippet of One by Metallica, which, you know, always gets the crowd going. And they close with Blind. Freak on the Leash just before, and then close with Blind. I've seen them open with Blind. I've seen them play Blind randomly in the middle of a set. This time we were watching them close with it. Which was, I guess, Korn's first big track off the first album. And they were just so good. I don't know if it was they were talked about like of a point to prove with Megadeth, but I don't know if this was Jonathan Davis coming back as a point to prove, or the band in general, because of what happened the year before, or the refreshing feel of having a different drummer, especially with Joey Jordison, if that made the band step up. It could have been a mixture of that, but they were so good. Hot in there, but good. You want a hot crowd and sweaty crowd at times for gigs, and that was definitely one of them, with that stream of condensation coming down. But the tone of the guitars was spot on, the mix was spot on, everything just fell into place for that set, and you came away buzzing from it. Really such a freaking great set. And that finished, and we came back round, did that loop back round. Now, normally, or it has been in recent years, the second stage band will finish a little bit earlier than main stage. So you see whoever you're seeing, if you're seeing someone headline second, and then you'll come and you'll see the last 45 minutes, half hour or so of main stage. Or if you're Iron Maiden, you request that no one else plays at the same time as you. We came back round expecting to catch the end of My Chemical Romance, but they weren't there. And the stage was half empty of fans, and we thought, it's early. And we thought that they had been bottled off, to be honest. We were quite surprised they weren't there. And that's all we could think. They hadn't. I think they received a bit of foreign objects arriving at their feet with things being thrown at them. But from what I believe, they held out and they played their full set. This was right at the height of their, or peak of their career, I would say, with the Black Parade. That album was huge for that band. But yeah, I was quite surprised that they weren't playing any longer. It must have been not the longest set. I know Korn did a fairly long set, 16, 17 tracks. So there we go. We didn't catch any of My Chemical Romance. I've seen them. I saw them. Where did I see them? I think it was Reading one year, I believe. Never my thing again. I'm not into every band that comes out. Not heavy enough for me, shall we say. I wasn't big on the whole emo scene. I thought it was kind of weird. I never had the Fringe or anything like that. Just not for me. So I wasn't overly disappointed. I was very happy with how good Korn were that night. Looking then, so that closes who we saw. Let's have a little look at who else was playing. A name that stands out. I won't go through everyone as I say each time, but a name that definitely stands out were a band that played on the second stage before Enter Shikari, and that's Paramore. And the reason that name stands out is a band that often gets thrown about as a headliner these days. There's the age-old sort of thing every year when Download announces their headliners for the main, of a lot of people, it's prodding the hornet's nest, because you get a lot of people on the internet who say, we shouldn't be having these bands anymore, it's the same old, where's the fresh headliners? I agree to a part. I think it's important to remember legacies by these bands. They're not going to be around forever, so I like to make the most of seeing these older bands that, you know, maybe are coming back more often than not. We're looking at Maiden, Def Leppard, Kiss, Metallica for some people, crazy. But I want to be seeing these bands because we're not going to have them for much longer. Look at Lemmy with Motorhead. Who knew the last time I saw him would be the last time I ever see him? Black Sabbath, Slayer. Ozzy probably doesn't have much left in him. You know, Kiss are on their 95th farewell tour. We won't have long to see these bands anymore, and I think that's important to remember. I'm all for newer bands coming through, and it's something that does concern me a little bit, that when we lose a lot of these bands that are still going, you know, like Maiden, AC/DC, Ozzy, Metallica, who is going to be there? Who is going to be big enough to step in and headline Download or any other of the big European festivals? I sometimes think that there aren't bands big enough to fill that, and that's why we're bringing back the same bands of that era, the older bands. So Paramore is a name that does get thrown around as to potentially come in and headline Download. As a band that hasn't done it, I think they're a Friday headliner-esque slot where it's maybe not the bigger of the headliners playing. It seems to be a place that new headliners kind of get tested now and again, like My Chemical Romance, Avenged Sevenfold. Did they do Friday? I might be wrong. I don't think they did, actually. Anywho. But yeah, there's lots of bands that get thrown about that haven't done it before. Headline Download, Foo Fighters, Blink, Green Day, Paramore. Some people say Nickelback. You know, so it's interesting to see them there. I believe it's the one and only time that Paramore have played. Maybe they will come back one day and headline. I don't know. We'll see. But there they were. Third stage, Cynic. Cool. That's a cool band. I saw Cynic out in Germany once. Enjoyed them. Other than that, nothing too much. Job for a Cowboy stands out. We had Hasty Dixie. I bet that was good for a little sing-song over there. And then, of course, Suicidal headlining third. That's Friday. Let's jump on to Saturday. So, we opened up, I think pretty much stayed on main stage again through Saturday. And we opened with a band called Teresis. Andy really liked Teresis, so went and checked him out, of course, for him. I'm not really on board with this whole gimmicky style of metal that Teresis came across with. You know, subgenres get broken down into pirate metal and battle metal. I think it's not a subgenre, but just a gimmick more than anything. I wouldn't call it a style of music. You know, whether you sound like Black Sabbath or whether you sound like Cannibal Corpse or whether you sound like Biffy Clyro, if you dress in pirate gear, does that automatically throw you into pirate metal? It's a gimmick, I feel, more than a subgenre, and I feel that Teresis were gimmicky. They did that Boney M cover of Rasputin, which, you know, people sang along with. Big crowd, a lot of people wearing the it's not corpse paint, I would guess, war paint maybe, with the red and the black. A lot of people that, drinking their mead and all of that sort of thing. Take it or leave it. It's not for me again. But again, big crowd. I said I'd talk about the crowds. I feel that when Download was back in the Monsters of Rock area, that we had bigger crowds back then. I look back on videos and see the main stage crowd for most of these bands, and it's huge compared to what I feel that it is now. Maybe I'm wrong, or it's just the layout makes it look a little bigger and a little bit different. But yeah, just each crowd was huge back then. Maybe we spread out a little bit more because there's more stages to choose from now with modern day Download. I don't know, but it just looked like every band on main had a huge crowd. Following that was Hell Yeah, who I believe this was Vinny's return to Donington for the first time since Dimebag was horribly murdered. He was back with Hell Yeah, which obviously Chad Gray from the recently reformed Mudvayne was fronting that. I've seen Hell Yeah a couple of times at Download. I always find them ridiculously bassy. It's uncomfortable how much the kick drum and the bass comes through in their mix. I don't know why, but it doesn't make for pleasurable experience because it just overshadows everything else. It was a little bit like that from what I remember back then. They opened with Hell Yeah, the track, which was my favourite track of theirs. It's never a band that I really followed or got into that much. The same with Damage Plan. For me, it was Pantera, and everything else didn't really matter too much. Oh, having said that, big fan of Down. And then with Chad Gray, Mudvayne, I really like Mudvayne. Not so much with Hell Yeah, and just too bassy for my liking. After that, a band that really got the pits sort of really going, and that was Shadows Fall, who were on the Redemption album, I believe at that point. No, was it called Redemption? No, the track was Redemption. Was it Threads of Life, I'm going to say? It had a green cover. I think Redemption was just the track. I don't know. Memory's fuzzy on that one. Shadows Fall. So, one thing that stuck out, and it's going to be a similar theme to the last download memory video, and I talked about it a lot, and that was Matt Heafy. Brian Fair from Shadows Fall did some vocals, and it sounded like he had gone to the same class as Matt Heafy to channel his inner James Hetfield. Metallica weren't even there that year, not even on site. At least Matt Heafy was like, well, James is here, he's on site. We didn't get that, but Brian Fair definitely had seemed to have pulled some inspiration from the Hetfield-esque vocal school. And we were getting some, sort of vocals, which, just be yourself, please. If I want to listen to that, I'd listen to Metallica. You know, be you. Be Matt Heafy, be Brian Fair, be Trivium, be Shadows Fall. Just be you. Don't worry about being James Hetfield. It'd be weirder if they channeled inner Bruce Dickinson, maybe. And that would stand out a little bit more. But yeah, we had some of that in there again. So maybe it's like a tradition at download now. Who knows? Aiden, didn't watch. Simple as, didn't like him, didn't watch. Sorry if you wanted to listen about Aiden. It's not going to happen. Oh man, another band who never really got into, and for a fairly good reason, I like to think. 30 Seconds to Mars. Jared Leto and friends, obviously well-known actor, went and did his thing with a band. They've done download a couple of times. I always say I try and stay impartial. If there's something I don't like, I'm not going to sit here and slag it off, because I don't want to do that. There's people out there watching this who are fans of that band. I don't want to do that. But Jared Leto, ego. It's all I can say. I'm going to talk about it in more length with the, I think it's 15 video, download 15, or whichever year they came back to play. I will talk about it more then, but ego is a word that I will use when describing this band live. I think he has a great big ego, more so on that later set from 15 or whatever year it was. Not so much in this set, but still just playing a rock star, it felt a little bit, and all the cliches and stereotypes with the ego sort of thing I felt. And I just felt a bit uncomfortable watching him. It just didn't feel natural. It felt very forced. And I'm sorry to say that, because I'm sure there are 30 Seconds to Mars fans out there, and a lot of them. But try and be honest without being horrible. But yeah, it just, I really didn't enjoy that one, I'm afraid. Went on to a band I did enjoy a little bit more, and that was a returning Bowling for Soup, who had been on the main stage previously, and they were back for a bit more of a comedy set, as they do. They did all their tracks, which, again, that festival band who, you may not be a fan of the band, but you know the certain tracks. Girl, all the bad guys, whatever it was, that one. And Oh man, I can't even think of other names. That 1985 one, was that them? I don't know. Anyway, they did those, the popular ones that you'd know. And then they did some covers at the end. They did some covers of some rock and metal stuff in their typical way. They had these two giant blow-up sheep on stage as well. I don't know why, but they were there. And yeah, sheep. Who knows? And then, band of the festival. They were better than Korn, Megadeth. The bands on the next day, which I'll come on to. A band at their absolute peak. And that was Machine Head. In 2004, Machine Head were my band of the festival. Maybe I should do that for each one. I'll tell you who my band of the festival is. It's Machine Head again. They did it in 04. They've done it again in 07. In 04, they were on the Through the Ashes of Empires album. This year, we were on the Blackening tour. They were doing the whole Blackening album cycle. And that was a record that just obliterated everything else that came out around that year. Probably for the 2 or 3 year around it as well, to be honest. The Blackening was a masterpiece. If you listen to anyone talk about it, they would probably agree. Hell of an album. And they were right in the midst of touring that. I was lucky enough to see Machine Head a few times throughout the Blackening. I saw them supporting Metallica. I saw them at Download. I saw them at their own. I did an arena show with several other metal artists on the bill. So I was lucky enough to see them at that huge peak of theirs. It's not the lineup anymore at all. The only one from that Ashes, Blackening, and the albums after lineup is Rob Flynn. The other guys have gone, which is a great shame. I was quite disappointed to see him go. But they were just on fire. Clenching the fists of Descent into Imperium. I mean, the place opened up. It was just a battlefield. There was pits everywhere. So everywhere you look, there was circle pits. We had dust mats down. We didn't in 05. We had them down now. So thankfully we didn't have all the dust clouds choking you and everything. But just insane. And like, they had a point to prove. We spoke about Megadeth having a point to prove. Machine Head and even Korn. Machine Head just knew they had to destroy the place, and they did. I mean, the band following them, which was Slayer, it's tough to either go on before Slayer or follow Slayer. Machine Head coming on before Slayer, then, you know, they've got a job to do. There'd be a lot of people there ready for Slayer. Machine Head got to go out there and hold their own. You know, Slayer fans can be tough. But they did. Man, they did. Old, Davidian, just Aesthetics of Hate as well in there. Real thrashy track, Dimebag. Wow. What an experience. What a time to be able to see that band. I'm so glad I got to see them back. You know, more, if you're newer, if you're a bit younger than I am, you know, in your teens, and you didn't get to see Machine Head at this time, I'm sorry for you, because you won't see them like this again, I don't think, with this lineup now. Anything they go out or bring out, now, I don't think it's going to compete with. I thought Through Ashes was great, but man, the Blackening. Slayer, as I say, followed. I like Slayer a lot. Again, we go back to thrash metal. This was on the back of Christ Illusion, which I really liked that album. You know, I thought it was a real good, solid album. I love thrash, as I touched on. I love Slayer. This is probably the one Slayer set I genuinely don't remember much about. I'm going to kind of put it down to Machine Head just knocking you for 6. But I don't remember too much about that Slayer set, if I'm completely honest. When I came back, again, I like to do not research for these download videos, as I say, I want it to go off memory, but I do look a couple of days in advance at the lineup. I go through the whole lineup and just try and spend a couple of days. I talk to Andy, we try and put some memories together, things we both remember. And yeah, I completely forgot that Slayer even played this year. Just a blank spot in my mind, so I don't really remember that much about them. Thankfully, that's not the case for later Slayer sets. Actually, we went quite a while before getting Slayer back. We seem to have quite a gap before Slayer returned. It was one of those where each year it's like, we're going to get Slayer, we're going to get Slayer. No, we're not going to get Slayer. And finally we got them again. But yeah, I just don't remember too much, unfortunately. It's a shame. I wish I could. I'd like to go back and relive. Dave Lombardo would have still been drumming at that point, so still that original Slayer lineup. We didn't get that for too much longer. Yeah, Slayer. A set I remember a little bit more of, maybe for the wrong reasons, following was our sub-headliner, and that was Mr. Marilyn Manson. I'm not going to divulge too much on Marilyn Manson. He obviously is in the news a lot at the moment for the wrong reasons. My personal take is I think we've seen the last probably of Marilyn Manson for a long time, if not ever. A lot has come to light right now on Marilyn Manson. I think that's something you can recover from. This set, I've seen him only at festivals. I've never seen him on his own tour inside, not a stadium, but an arena or academy show. So I've only got festivals to base him on. I think I've seen him 4 times maybe. Out of those 4, I'd say one of those was really solid, good Marilyn Manson set, and the other times were very poor. The best time I've ever seen him was at Reading. He sub-headlined to Iron Maiden. This is going back to 2005, I'd say. It's my first time seeing both Marilyn Manson and Maiden at Reading. Manson was on form that day. I've touched upon before about certain bands I would have liked to have seen in a certain era. Manson back in 2000, 2001 is someone I think I really would have liked to have seen live. We're not too far off when I saw him in 2005, so, you know, he's on the tail of that really great time of seeing Manson. And he was great. This download set, I can only think that he was drunk. I think I've seen probably Manson drunk a couple of times when performing. He was forgetting lyrics. He was clumsy. Coming out with randomness. Just not what I want to see from Marilyn Manson. I want to see this edgy, on fire guy. I don't want to see this drunken, bumbling mess. And that's what he was. A shame, because he had a good band around him. Who all suddenly seemed to be playing for Rob Zombie. But I just don't know. He wasn't with it properly that day. Drugs or drink, I don't know. But he wasn't the Marilyn Manson I remembered from a few years prior. Sad to say. All the songs were there, but when you're missing lyrics, forgetting lyrics, falling over things, just looking a mess, just... You know, I wanna see and remember Marilyn Manson for doing the things that shock you for the right reasons. You know, you don't know what he's going to do next. You know, I don't want that thing that he's going to do next is fall over drunkenly or whatever. But that was Manson. It was a shame. Unfortunately, the times after, I think one of the times was a bit better. Came away like that was a little bit more what I want from him. And then I think the next time we went back to bumbling mess Marilyn Manson. It's such a shame, and you know, a lot's happened recently, and it's not good. It is what it is, so you know. And then we went on to our headliner, which was a returning headliner with Linkin Park. They were on the back of Minutes to Midnight, so that would have been their third release. We got some Minute to Midnight tracks, but pretty heavy on Hybrid Theory and Meteora still. Not as memorable set as the first time I saw him in 2004 headlining. This was at the point where I kind of went a separate way to Linkin Park. I found them to become a little bit too poppy. They were coming out of that new metal sound. That's what made them, I think, right in the height of new metal, with bands like Limp Bizkit, System, Slipknot, amongst others. And they were developing away, they were evolving, they were almost growing up, coming into Minutes to Midnight, and that's where I kind of lost way with them. A bit too poppy, a bit light for me. They were headlining a few years back, and they did the whole of Hybrid Theory, which I would have liked to have seen. I was watching someone else. I was a bit bummed to come out and realise they'd already done Hybrid Theory. I ended up seeing a lot of their more modern, poppier songs and just wasn't impressed. So not as good a set as 2004. You know, they were still great to hear, the Hybrid and the Meteora tracks, but Minutes to Midnight just bummed the set out a little bit for me, just on personal taste. And yeah, that was our Saturday. Shall we look at who else was playing? The second stage, I have to say, was pretty strong. There's some bands on there I think I really would have liked to have gone to see, and probably would go to see over some of the bands maybe that we did see. So we had Bring Me the Horizon, who had gone up a little bit. We said about bands being in a lower position. Bring Me the Horizon, before whatever year it was, before were a lower slot on the third stage. They were now about a quarter of a way up on the second stage, so they were progressing. Another band like Paramore, whose name gets thrown out there a lot for being a new headliner, a fresh headliner, someone we haven't got. It's funny, I'm going to touch upon it a little bit more, this headliner debate. It's an interesting one because fickle fans that we are, who like to sit on the internet and voice our opinion to anyone that will listen. We're damned if we do, damned if we don't, is what I think the guys in the production offices at Download HQ say sometimes, because we get these repeat headliners. They book these repeat headliners where we see Def Leppard every couple of years, or Maiden, or whoever. And everyone complains. But then we get fresh headliners coming in. Muse, Biffy Clyro, when Slipknot came in for the first time, Avenged Sevenfold. And people kick off, where's Iron Maiden? Where's Metallica? And it's an interesting one. We like to moan. There's plenty else on offer to go and check out. If I don't like a main stage headliner, I will go and seek out second or third or fourth, because there's probably going to be a band I want to see. You know, My Chemical Romance from the night before, I didn't want to see My Chemical Romance. I go see Korn. There's no point me complaining, because there's a great band on somewhere else. I'm going to go find them. And I've done it since. There's been plenty of main stage headliners I haven't gone to watch because there's been someone who I prefer on elsewhere. Looking at the Saturday headline, I kind of wish I'd gone to see them on second. But Bring Me the Horizon is a band that does get thrown out there as a headliner. I again think they, like Enter Shikari, for more of a Reading feel. I think Reading back used to be on at least one of the days, maybe giving Download a little run for its money. They usually have a bit of a heavier day. Like the year I went and saw Maiden, or, you know, when Metallica have been there. It's a little bit of a heavier day. I've seen Slayer and Mastodon and Killswitch Engage at Reading. So, whereas nowadays, I don't think Reading is anywhere close to what it used to be. I look at Reading, I like to think my musical knowledge is not bad, especially when it comes to rock and metal and country and blues and whatnot. So maybe I'm a little out of touch with some of the stuff, but I look at Reading's lineup these days and I really don't know who half of them are. I really don't. And I kind of, it might sound really bad of me to say, but it's kind of artists that have got their 5 minutes, big 5 minutes, you know, doing well for themselves. But this is where I think rock and metal differs. If you're a fan of a band from that first release, you are probably going to stay with that band through. You know, all of those fans back in '83 when Kill 'Em All came out, or even before that with No Life Till Leather. They hear that and they stick with them all through, you know, highs and lows. You look at Reload or Saint Anger or whatever, they stick with them. Whereas a lot of these acts that I see come and do Reading now and Glastonbury in some cases, you're going to like them maybe for that year or two, and then they might get forgotten about, and you're on to whatever's popular next. It's kind of how I feel how Reading is right now. Controversial maybe. You know, I might incite some people to complain about what I've just said, not be happy with what I've just said, but it's how I see it, my personal view. But I do think the Bring Me Horizon fit more of a Reading lineup these days, along with bands like Enter Shikari. But there they were. Anathema, My Dying Bride, two bands that I think I would have liked to have seen. Gallows were on there. Back with Frank Carter at that point. So that would have been a wild show. That would have been a real wild show. Frank Carter is off the rails at times. Biffy Clyro, yet again. I always say how many times Biffy have played. They go under the radar. We get a lot of people going back to that point about Biffy headlining. You know, you forget that Biffy have gone through the ranks. They've done download a lot of times. And there they were. Above them was Satellite Party, which I think was, what's his name? Is it Perry Farrell? The guy from Jane's Addiction. I think that was his band. I might be wrong. And then our headliners were Motley Crue. And in hindsight, looking back, I think I would have gone down the Motley Crue route if I could choose now. I didn't. I went with Linkin Park. But Crue, yeah, I like Crue. Yeah, they're not as heavy as some of the bands I'm into, but I do like them. And kick off at me, I don't care. Bring it on. I like Motley Crue. They're a good band. They're a great band. Third stage, no one really that stuck out. We had Architects, actually, who have pushed up through the ranks, have become a very solid British metal band. They're almost leading the current British metal field of the modern bands. They're doing really well for themselves, Architects. But there they were, sort of midway through third stage. And then, yeah, as I say, Head Automatica headlining. Sunday. Let's jump on to Sunday. Now, if you saw the last video, you saw me talk about that crazy idea when we got down the front on the Sunday of 2006. I turned to Andy and said, fancy staying on the barrier? Yeah, okay. And we did. We stayed on the barrier. But we said we won't do it again. It's a long day to be stood in one spot, hungry, dehydrated, and, you know, whatever else. We got in early, Sunday morning, download 2007. We went down to the barrier, turned to Andy, do you want to stay on the barrier? Okay, we did. We did it for the second year. Thankfully, I think the Sunday this year was a lot stronger than the Sunday the previous year. I got a little bit bored with a couple of the bands the previous year while down there. I didn't really for the Sunday this year. Kicking off main stage was an Indian band brought in by Iron Maiden called Parikrama. I hope I pronounced that right. Apologies if I haven't. Parikrama, who were, as I say, an Indian band that had played, I believe, with Iron Maiden. Maiden brought them in. I think Maiden have a little bit of say when they play on bands that come in. You'll usually see one of the kids' bands. They're not kids anymore, but Austin, I think is Austin Dickinson is Bruce's son, and then Lauren Harris, who actually did play on the Sunday. And then I can't tell you much about them. They had a fiddle player. That's all I can remember. After that, we're a band called Reuben, British rock band. Never really a fan of Reuben. one of those bands that kind of were on and we watched because they were there in front of us. We were on the barrier. We had nowhere else to go, so we watched them. Can't tell you anything about them. Never really a fan. And that's where the day picked up after these guys. Coming on after Ruben were Chimera, who was still going back then, obviously. That's what they were playing. And they were the first band to really get the crowd going that day. There was a lot of pits. They were on... Was it Resurrection, I think? I think the album was Resurrection. On that tour, anyway. They did Nothing Remains, Power Trip, Pure Hatred, I think they did as well. It's a really solid set. A lot of the more known songs by Chimera. And again, huge crowd, a lot of pits going on. It was kind of hard to gauge everything because we were at the front on the barrier. Kind of just went off the big screens for what we could see of them. But solid, again, just 100% or 110% energy in with that band. It's a shame that they're not doing anything anymore. I'd love to see Chimera come back and do a nice second stage slot maybe. A download, do a tour. I'd be pretty down with that. And then we had Papa Roach following that, who, had they played before? I forget. I think they had. Yes, they had. They did Sunday 05, I think, on main stage. So they were back on a Sunday again. Quite, I hate to say greatest hits with these bands, because, you know, when you think of greatest hits, I kind of think of pop acts and stuff like that. But it was a hit set, all the tracks you'd expect. Still relatively early into their career, you know, not many albums at least into their career. So you were still getting a lot from Infest, for example. Jacoby came down into the crowd. That man has far too much energy. He is just a ball of energy. He's always like 100% hyped. And he came down into the crowd. He didn't come towards where we were. He went up that central partition between the two sides. And he did whatever he did down there. I can't remember what song. But yeah, just a lot of energy with him. Yeah, solid set, really. After, here we go. So following Papa Roach, we had Mastodon. I've spoke about Mastodon before when I was in sixth form back at school many moons ago. Leviathan lived in my CD player, my big chunky CD player when you can only have one CD before MP3 and iPods, whatever. Shoved it in my pocket and Leviathan would get played and played and played and played. And anybody in my class, whether you liked metal or you didn't, you were hearing about Leviathan from me. Everything about it, the drums, the bass, the vocals, the artwork. Man, I must have bored everyone silly about that album, about that band. But Mastodon, I've seen a lot of times. Festivals, support slots. They're quite a proggy band now. They've gone in a slightly different direction, quite proggy. Back then, I think we were on the verge of going from that harder, metaler sound to a more proggy sound. So we were going off Blood Mountain at this point, which is a slight transition, I felt, to more what they are now. But I stand by this, and I've said this numerous times. I think Mastodon Inside is a different element to Mastodon Festival wise. 05, when I saw them in the second stage, was good because they were in a marquee. It felt more inside. I don't like Mastodon at these big open air festivals. I don't think they are quite a festival band, which is a shame, and that's me being honest, coming from a big Mastodon fan. When I've seen Mastodon Inside, it'll blow me away, easy. But outside, I don't know why, it just doesn't quite add up, and I can't put my finger on why, but I've never particularly enjoyed them out on festival shows. Brent Hines' voice always sticks in my mind from that show. It sounded like a cat squealing. I don't know why his vocals were like that day, that day. But it just sounded horrible. It really did. And again, I love Mastodon, but it just sounded like nails on a chalkboard, like a cat noise. It was just not nice. And yeah, you kind of stand there with them, for me, watching them at a festival show and just, I don't know, just don't like it as much as when I see them inside. Who knows? Band of the day coming up next, at least. And I'm sure most of you have probably seen this because this show got put out on DVD, and that was Lamb of God, who were on the what was the album called? I can't remember what it's called now, but it had Redneck on and Walk With Me and How. It all come to me. Sacrament, that was it. We're on the Sacrament tour, and they put this show out on DVD. I'm on that DVD, if anyone has it. What track is it? I watched it recently. Now You've Got Something to Die For, I'm going to go with. If you watch that, if you've got that show, or if you go into YouTube, you'll spot a very young Matt getting very much into Lamb of God. They were great. Again, they, like Mastodon the day before, just pits everywhere. You know, with Redneck and whatever, and then Black Label, which they've stopped playing. Why, Lamb of God, have you stopped playing that track? Man, that was the best way to end a Lamb of God show. Why they don't play it anymore, I don't know. I imagine there's a reason, I don't know what it is. But Black Label used to be an amazing end to a Lamb of God show, and they just don't do it anymore. Thumbs down, metal horns down. But I'm happy to say they played at this show. It just leveled Donington. It was so good, and I'm so glad that that show got put out on DVD to remember fully. Can watch it. I think Lamb of God have gone from strength to strength. I don't really think they've put out a weak album. I don't think the albums are up to the strength of, say, The Blackening, for example. But I think their albums are solid. And you're going to go, it's a bit like go see Slayer. You know what you're going to get from a Lamb of God show. Randy Blythe, again, is a ball of energy. He knows how to command a crowd. And I think that both Mark Morton and Willie Adler are hugely underrated guitarists in the metal scene. I think their riff work is so intricate. They play some solid riffs, but the intricacies of what they play, it is very fast and very technical. I'm not a guitarist, I'm a drummer, but watching them, you can just see it, that there's so much talent with those guys. And I do think those two, that pair, is a very underrated metallic duo in the metal world, guitarist-wise. Yeah, really, really great stuff. And Chris Adler was still with them. Obviously, he's gone from the band now. Did a brief stint with Megadeth. But yeah, again, just a band all guns blazing that day. Great set list. Everything you kind of want to hear. On fire. Really on fire. Coming after them, returning yet again, was Corey Taylor. This time again with Stone Sour. I think this keeps up his download every year track record, which I think got broken the year after. So 03 Stone Sour, 04 Slipknot, 05 Slipknot, 06 Stone Sour, 07 Stone Sour. Pretty much, I think, an identical style set list to the year before. It was kind of odd to be bringing back the same band in pretty much a similar slot to play almost identical set list. Sort of thing I think people would kick off about now if that happened. It didn't match the set the year before. That was Stone Sour at their best the year before. I don't think this set was as good. They opened with 35th 30, 31, 50 into Come Whatever May, I think it was. They were still on that album cycle. So yeah, it's kind of odd to get that repeat booking in, again, just a similar slot. Wasn't even like bumping them onto second stage headline or anything like that. So it's kind of odd. But we like seeing Corey Taylor at Donington, so hey. Who did we have after we had Killswitch Engage? Sadly, no Adam D. He was, I don't know what he was doing. I feel he had surgery or something at this point. I know he's got a bit of a track record of some surgeries. But we had, I can't remember his surname, I think his name is Pat. And he was with, I'm going to say Damage Plan, but he was filling in on guitar. Obviously, it's not the same having a Killswitch show without Adam D. You know, the sort of banter, I guess, between Howard and Adam D was always, you know, pretty fun to watch in a Killswitch show. We were on As Daylight Dies. So, you know, you'd get the tracks like My Curse, for example. I remember, I think it was the last track that they did, My Last Serenade. And Howard went down, a bit like Jacoby did. He went down to the crowd on the middle partition. He encouraged a lot of crowd surfing, which, you know, Andy and I being on that barrier down the front, definitely felt the wrath of. We just had crowd surfer after crowd surfer coming bowling over the top of us. But it was good, you know, stuff like that, you don't care. It's the energy, you feel the energy. I spoke about it before. You get a singer down there and you feed off that energy. And Howard didn't quite make it round to where we were, but you still feed off that energy. And the energy of the crowd surfers coming over the top of you and whatnot, you know. It's a good time. You're at a metal show. What can you expect? It's going to be a little bump and bruise here and there. It's in a Westlife show, for Christ's sake. So yeah, and I do prefer Howard. With Killswitch, I always preferred Howard era Killswitch. When Jesse Leach came back, kind of lost way a little bit with Killswitch. I've picked up Atonement on vinyl, so that will be a record we'll be looking at soon on the channel, but that's a good record. And it's kind of like Howard's kind of weirdly still in the band, because he does do tracks with the band still, and he does make the odd guest appearance live with the band, so he is kind of an unofficial member, I guess, maybe. On to our sub-headliner before Maiden, and that is Evanescence. The one and only time I've seen Evanescence. I can't go as far as saying I'm a fan. A couple of tracks weren't too bad. If I heard them on the music channel, you know, listen and recognise them. We spoke about Marilyn Manson being a little bit off colour, shall we say. I am led to believe by people, I don't think I really clocked it at the time, but since, and going back over the years and watching some footage from this set, I believe Amy Lee was drunk during this. She was a little... I've never seen Evanescence live and never have since, so I don't have much to go off really. But she did seem a little erratic. And her vocals unfortunately weren't there. Or they were there, just not in key. Her vocals weren't that strong, that set. I saw some footage of them at Rock am Ring, and I think vocally she was stronger in Germany than she was with us. Huge crowd. I think it was a slight tough crowd on them, because we go back to that point and we mentioned with Slayer. Slayer's a tough fan base. Slayer's a tough crowd. You're a female fronted kind of, dare I say, poppy, gothy, styly rock band, and you're going on before Iron Maiden. That is some slot to be going with. There's not many bands who can really pull it off going on before a Maiden show. So Evanescence were in a funny position. They were following a pretty solid metal afternoon with Lamb of God, Mastodon, Stone Sour, Killswitch. Maybe that's why Amy Lee had a couple of lemonades before. I don't know. But yeah, they didn't do My Immortal. I think that was a smart choice. Might have disappointed the fan base, but don't know how that would have fared with a lot of the diehard Maiden brigade. Maybe they would have liked it. I don't know. But yeah, it was... I remember the bass player seeming really cocky and a little bit arrogant towards the crowd at points as well. I don't know if that was because things were being fired up. Nothing too bad. I've seen far worse. But the odd thing was being thrown up. I don't know if that was just an annoyance at that, or maybe an annoyance that maybe Amy Lee was not maybe as strong as she could have been, to put it politely. But yeah, that was Evanescence. She pulled out piano a few times, did a few piano-y tracks and whatnot, and yeah, that was that. They were coming back. They did 03. I don't know what they were like at 03. But then we lead on to Iron Maiden. Where can you go wrong with Iron Maiden? What a way to close out Donington and Download 2007. Iron Maiden on A Matter of Life and Death was the album they were on the tour with. It was relatively heavy, as they always do whenever a Maiden's got a new album out. They will promote the hell out of it and play a lot off the album. Some bands do, some bands don't so much. Maiden do. So we got a few, mainly at the start of the set, got a few A Matter of Life and Death tracks. But then we went into the staples, Wrathchild, The Trooper. I think they closed with Hallowed Be Thy Name, Run to the Hills, Number of the Beast, Fear of the Dark. I remember one of my favourite Maiden tracks is Children of the Damned. I just love that track, and it was the best version, live version I had ever seen, both live and seeing live footage on YouTube or DVDs or whatever. Man, that was so good. Children of the Damned. I've watched it back a few times over on YouTube, and just staggering how good that version was that night. Evil That Men Do, another one of my favourite Maiden tracks, was played. We didn't get a couple of the others that I am a big fan of. Aces High and Power Slave were not, but with an extensive back catalogue and so many great tracks. They're long tracks as well, so you're limited, obviously. You know, you're always going to get some tracks that you like which aren't featured, but I remember Bruce had a little slip, and it's always sticks in my mind. Bruce slipped on the monitors, on the wedges at the front during Wrathchild. He's took tumbles before. There's footage out there of him slipping and taking little tumbles, as I'm sure everybody does. But the thing that stuck into my mind and really cemented how much of a phenomenal legend that man is, he didn't miss a note. He slipped, he fell on the wedges, and he carried on. He didn't deviate from the lyrics. He managed to nail every other word, or every word, not every other word. Fantastic. What a professional. He made light of it. I think Yannick had a little fun with it. It happens to the best of us. It happens to the best of them. You know, we're all human at the end of the day. It was a fun little moment to see. I'm sure he was very embarrassed, but what a pro. Didn't miss a beat. Phenomenal. And that was Maiden closing out Download 2007. Let's have a little look, as we do, at our other stages. Again, the second stage was pretty solid. It would have been tough that day for me now to go main or second. Equally as strong, I think. Cancer Bats, Unearthed, Devil Driver, Orange Goblin, Paradise Lost, Napalm Death, Within Temptation, Dimmu Borgir, Dream Theater, and Billy Talent. Yes, to pretty much all of the above. Bar maybe Within Temptation. Not as big a fan as them, but I would have definitely taken all of the others. If that was a second stage lineup these days, I probably would have camped out at the second stage and watched throughout that day, because that is strong. I can only imagine bands like Devil Driver in that tent, Napalm Death, Dimmu Borgir in there would have been phenomenal. Paradise Lost as well. God, that would have been a fun day in there. Third stage. The only one that really stands out that have kind of gone on to bigger things is In This Moment, who had quite an early slot. Lauren Harris was quite high on the bill. I think that's, again, coming back to Iron Maiden, having a bit of dictatorship almost on the bill and who plays that day. And then Real Big Fish closing out the Tuborg stage, the third stage. And that was Download 2007, the last one to be in that iconic middle of a racetrack location. We moved for 08. That we'll obviously talk about next time. But there we go. We had a fun time again. The fourth download of mine wrapped up. Some really great bands that we saw. Some bands in their prime. Some bands that were starting to make waves. Another Donington. So, that's 07. I'll be back same time next week for Download 2008. That'll be an interesting one, talking about the move away and what was involved. But there we go. Remember, everyone, if you like what you see, please, please, please subscribe. Let's build up this channel, get it out to more people. Hit like on those videos and the bell for all notifications. Again, I'll be back with more vinyl content, some other stuff in the pipe works for you guys as well. Same time next week for 2008. And until then, have a good time.